Bienvenidos a todos. Not yet. Here goes one more time. Bienvenidos todos. This is Abelardo de la Peña Jr. con la Plaza de Cultura y Arte, welcoming you to En Casa con la Plaza Cocina. Every Monday, as you know, we have our demonstrations, cooking talks about the best cuisine in the world, la comida mexicana. And today we have a little different one. Usually we do cooking or roasting or grilling, but today we're going to go into the oven. And to present, first of all, if you're on our Zoom, if you zoomed in, make sure to let us know where you're coming from on the chat. If you have a question, there's the Q&A button. You could ask questions. If you're on Facebook, we're also live on Facebook. Please let us know where you're viewing from. Send us your comments, your questions. We'll save them throughout the show, but you know we're not going to ignore you. And now to get us started, I'm going to welcome you once more on a Monday, Jimena Martin, our Director of Programs in Culinary Arts. Take it away, Jimena.
Muchas gracias, Alberto. Thank you so much. Today we have something totally special. We're coming directly from Mexico City. We have Eliceo Lara, baker born in Mexico City. For the last 4 years, he's been teaching how to make Mexican bread and pastries to local travelers, but mainly through Airbnb Experiences. His specialty is pan dulce and tres leches cake. He has hosted classes of Mexican baked goods with over 2,000 guests in Mexico City, but also in the United States, Canada, Spain, Portugal, and in France. His favorite moment, the guest reactions when bread comes out of the oven. So Eliceo, how are you?
I'm good, thank you. Jimena, how are you?
I'm good, thank you. So tell us, what are you going to bake with us today with?
Today we're gonna make polvorones tricolor. We have different kinds of polvorones in Mexico. I think maybe the 3 most popular are polvorones de naranja, the orange version. We also have polvorones de nuez, which is like walnuts, pecans sometimes. And the kind that we're gonna make today is a 3-colored version of it. And let me show you. Let's see if you can see it right there. I'm sure you've seen this in Mexican bakeries.
That looks delicious. I can't wait to start. Can you show us how we get started, please?
Sorry, what?
Let's get started.
Oh, perfect. Okay. Let's get started. So I'm gonna give you the ingredients that we're gonna be using today. This is an eggless cookie. So we are going to use 2 different kinds of fat today. We're gonna use vegetable shortening or Crisco, and we're gonna use butter as well. That could be 140 grams each, or 10 tablespoons. So we have those 2. Next, we have 280 grams powdered sugar. In the United States, you have like 1,000 names for powdered sugar. In Mexico, we just call it azúcar glass. That's it. In the United States, you have powdered sugar, icing sugar,
granulated sugar, raw sugar.
Yeah. So the powdered sugar, any kind of powdered sugar that you can find is the one that we will be using today. We are also going to use some vanilla extract. Of course, you can change the extract. That would be only 4 grams or 1 teaspoon. I've made this successfully with vanilla extract and with almond extract. I strongly recommend that one as well. We're going to use vanilla today since it's maybe the most popular way to do it.
Eliceo, quick question. Is it possible to make this a vegan cookie and just use it all vegetable versus coordinating it with butter?
Yes, definitely. You can do that. You can use all shortening. Instead of 140 grams butter and 140 grams shortening, you could do 280 of just shortening, and you would have a vegan version of this.
Perfect, thank you.
And then finally, we're going to be using 330 grams of all-purpose flour. It's important that it's all-purpose flour. We do not want to use, let's say, bread flour, because that would give you a very different texture. We're looking for a very crumbly texture this time. That's also the reason this recipe doesn't have any eggs.
What if you have whole wheat? Can we use whole? I mean, here in Los Angeles, there's a lot of, that's why I asked for the vegan questions. A lot of people kind of staying away from regular all-purpose. What if we have whole wheat flour? Would that still work for this?
I would, let's say whenever you're using whole wheat, I wouldn't use all whole wheat because that would make a very dense final baked good. So I would use maybe half whole wheat, half all-purpose. It wouldn't be like that if you were making bread. Let's say if you were making bread, I wouldn't use more than, let's say, 20% of whole wheat, unless you want like a very dense, you know, like Eastern Europe kind of bread that is kind of dense and heavy. And if you're looking for that texture, that's great. Otherwise, I wouldn't use more than 20% of whole wheat flour in that case.
Thank you, Eliceo, for sharing your expertise. These are questions that have come this way. I just want people who are watching us not to worry that if you signed up on Zoom and also on Facebook, we do have the recipe available to you. So either you get it through email or be so kind to look us up on our Facebook and you can see Eliceo's Polvorones Tricolores recipe. So not to worry. So please continue, Eliceo. I'm sorry to interrupt you.
Of course. And finally, besides that, we're only going to need some food coloring. Traditionally, we use yellow and we use pink food coloring for these ones. So you have the 3 different colors, but of course, feel free to use whichever colors you prefer for this one.
Qué pena, Eliceo. Una pregunta más. One more question. I'm sorry again. Someone, Laura Longoria is asking, what about almond flour? Can we use almond flour in this recipe?
I did try that because like everyone else, I was on the keto diet for a while. So I tried that and it was such a big failure. But you can do maybe half wheat flour, half all-purpose flour, and half almond flour. That way you would have that nice like earthy flavor coming from the almond. But you also have the structure that's going to give your cookie the all-purpose flour.
Okay, I was doing keto for a while, so I was trying to bake as well with almond. I know there's coconut flour. Is there a possible way, or should we test drive later almond flour and coconut flour, or a mix of the 3 flours, so to reduce the carbohydrate content in the cookie per se?
Yeah, I would do maybe a third of each, as you were saying, to have as less carbs as possible, but have a nice structure. Yeah, because the problem with those flours is that they don't develop any gluten. So gluten is what gives a structure to a lot of baked goods. And that's, I think, the tricky part. It's very easy to make like a low carb, maybe cake. But let's say a bread, it's very difficult to replicate the same texture.
Yeah, I tried doing it. It's very eggy.
Yeah,
it's
definitely.
Eggy and flat. As much as I did with the almond flour and coconut, it just wasn't, can't fake it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Flowers. Yeah. A lot of questions about the flowers. Sorry, continue. Sorry.
Yeah, of course. No, and I think it's important to, like ask those questions because especially in the States, you have so many flowers on the baking aisle. In Mexico, we usually just have like all-purpose flour and whole wheat, and that's all you can find in the supermarkets usually. But in the States, you have like bread flour, self-rising flour, cake flour, all-purpose flour, and then all your nut flours and everything. So it's important to know the difference, to know which kind you should use every single time and why you're using it.
Okay, good. Let's make a real cookie though.
Yeah, perfect. Let's do that. Okay, so I'm gonna take you to my counter so you can see what is happening here. Let me get rid of this. Okay, you can, oh, by the way, before we start, I'm gonna use a stand mixer, but you can use a stand mixer, a hand mixer. If you have the elbow grease for it, you can also do this by hand, but you can use any kind of mixer that you have in hand. Okay, so I'm gonna take you to my counter so you can see what is happening here. I already have here my ingredients. Having your ingredients ready ahead of time before you start your recipe is very, very important. In the kitchens and professional kitchens and bakeries, we call this the mise en place, which is just a French term to say that you have everything ready to go before you start your recipe. This is very important, first because it will give you a clear mind before you start, but also because you do not want to find out that you don't have some ingredient. And that has happened, I think, to everyone before, right? That you are in the middle of a recipe and then they're like, oh no, I'm missing an egg. And then you have to run to the store really quickly. So having your ingredients ready ahead of time will give you, will ensure the success of your recipe. So for this recipe, I'm gonna start by mixing the fat, both kinds of fat. I'm gonna start with the butter and I'm gonna add the shortening. And to that, I am going to add the powdered sugar. All my powdered sugar goes in. By the way, I usually sift powdered sugar most of the times. In this case, I'm not going to sift it because we're gonna beat for a very long time. So that will take care of the lumps.
Eliceo?
Yes.
Quick question, is that cold butter? Is your butter room temp? And I also have someone who's baking with us as we go to preheat the oven. At what temperature should we preheat the oven?
Oh, nice. Yes, if you are baking with me, that is amazing. Please do send pictures. We're gonna preheat our ovens to 400 Fahrenheit. 400 Fahrenheit, and in case someone is baking in Mexico, that would be 200 Celsius. Okay. So yes, usually for this cookie, it's very important that you have both the butter and the shortening at room temperature, please. Okay, so I'm gonna use the paddle attachment, which is this one. This is the one you would want to use for cookies or cakes. Now, I'm gonna start in a very low speed because I do not want to have a big cloud of sugar all over my counter. So I'm gonna start in a very, very low speed. And as soon as I can see these ingredients are incorporated, then I'm gonna increase the speed and I'm gonna beat until light and fluffy. If you are using a hand mixer, I would definitely start mixing by hand. Otherwise, you would have all your kitchen covered in powdered sugar, and that has happened to me before. So I said that from my experience. Now, if you are using a hand mixer, it would be exactly the same process. Then as soon as you start using your mixer, start in a low speed, and then you can increase your speed once the ingredients have been incorporated. This way of making baked goods, it's called the creaming method. Okay, before I explain that, now I can see my ingredients are incorporated. So I'm going to increase the speed to a medium-high speed. If you are using a stand mixer, like a KitchenAid style mixer, that would be around speed number 6. And we want to beat this until light and fluffy. As I was saying, this is called the creaming method. Whenever you find a recipe that calls for beat until light and fluffy, it's very possible that you're using the creaming method. And it always goes like this. You start with the fat. You start by mixing the fat in your recipe and the sugar. And then you mix until light and fluffy for a couple of minutes. And then you would incorporate the eggs. If your recipe has eggs, and after that you would incorporate the dry ingredients. When we get to the dry ingredients, it's very important that we do not overmix. That is very important when you're making cookies. We do not want to develop a lot of gluten here. It's not like bread. Like, you know, when we're making bread, we want to knead and knead and knead until you have developed the gluten. In this case, we do not want to do that. So as soon as the flour gets there, we are not going to mix for a very long time. Do we have any questions?
We have a lot of saludos. We have from Baldwin Park, Victor Zamora. Helena Gastelum from South Central Los Angeles says hola. We also have Maria Lugo from Palmdale, Kathy Romero from Rosemead, Jean Dinkton from Redondo Beach, Nancy Navarro from Pasadena, Marisol Hernandez Arellano from San Fernando. And yes, a lot of folks are watching and really excited to see how your cookies are coming out. Now with the holidays coming up, with great gifts.
Yes.
Now
oh yeah, these are perfect for Christmas. Yeah.
You know, now the kids are back in school, a little after school snack. Let me see.
Yeah, these are great with café de olla. These are amazing.
And also Roberta Martinez from Pasadena says hello. Maria Watts, all the way from West Virginia, is watching as well.
Oh, nice.
And Nia Mura from Pasadena. Could you tell us a little bit more about your Airbnb? So if we by chance are in Mexico City, how do we find you?
Yes. So right now I stopped doing the in-person classes, but yes, I was doing that for 4 years, and I will be going back to my in-person classes as soon as all this craziness is over. Right now, I'm just doing online classes that I just host via Instagram. Usually, I post in my Instagram all my classes. I usually do one every other weekend, and it's usually a different Mexican baked good every time. Okay, so this looks ready to me. How do you know it's ready? You know, because it looks very light and airy. Also, this is a very different color as when we started. It's a very, very pale yellow now, and it's very different from the first color that we had when we first mixed the butter and the shortening. So this looks good to me. So what I'm gonna do now, I usually like to clean the sides of the bowl with my paddle attachment. Just to make sure everything will be nicely incorporated and I'm not leaving any ingredients behind. There we go. Okay. So now,
I think you're gonna get some more followers on Instagram. A lot of folks are asking how to find you on Instagram. So I just posted your account.
Oh, perfect. Thank you very much. Thank you. Yes. So to this, I am going to add my flour. All the flour goes in. Again, no need to sift it because we will be mixing this with the paddle attachment. And also the vanilla extract goes in, or your extract of choice. Okay. So now, as I said before, once you add the flour, you do not want to mix for a very long time. And this is valid. I think every time that you're making cookies, you do not want to over mix it. So I'm simply going to put this back on. Again, if you are using a hand mixer, it is a good idea to start mixing by hand, so you don't have a big cloud of flour all over the counter. If you have a set, yes.
I'm sorry. Yesi Niamuro is asking, the almond polvorones are they also known as wedding cookies, the Mexican wedding cookies? Can we make Mexican wedding cookies with this batch?
That's a very it's a same texture, but it's a different recipe, because those usually you have walnuts or pecans, so you would always have that nutty flavor. And this one, you do not, traditionally you wouldn't use that. But it's the same texture. It's very similar texture.
Thank you.
So I'm gonna start my mixer. I'm using a very low speed. And I'm gonna increase the speed just a little bit, so this is mixed evenly. There we go. So as you can see, the dough is starting to form now. I just want this to be evenly incorporated, and then I'm going to stop. So I'm going to increase the speed very quickly. I can see this is almost ready. As soon as you don't see any dry ingredients in the bottom of your bowl, then the dough is ready to go. Okay, we are almost there. And that's it. We do not want to need any more this dough. So now we have the dough ready, but we need to separate this in 3 parts, and we are going to color 2 of these. One is going to be pink, and the other one is going to be yellow. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to transfer these to a different bowl, to a bigger bowl. And then I will use a kitchen scale to make sure I have 3 equal parts of the dough. Of course, you can just eyeball it. This is just my OCD, but you can just eyeball it, of course.
Eliceo, how did you learn to bake? Did you go to school? Did you work from home? Mom, dad, grandma?
It was, I started while I was in college. I found this very, very small bread school very close to my college, and I just had the time. It was, my college experience was great because I studied in Mexico City downtown. We would always joke that it was the only university where we had more, you know, like cantinas around than any other college in the city, because it's in Mexico City downtown. It was a great experience, honestly, just going to college here.
What were you studying?
I did something that has nothing to do with nothing. It's literature and language sciences. That was my major. When I finished college, I actually gave my mom my degree, haven't used it, not even once. And from there, I went straight to pastry school. And I've been baking ever since.
That's awesome to find your passion and be able to share that with us.
Exactly. Okay, so I just put a third of the dough back in the mixer bowl. If you are using a mixer, that would be around 280 grams. 280 grams. I'm gonna start with the yellow color. I will be using the gel food coloring today. I usually prefer the gel food coloring because it will give you a nice intense color without changing too much the texture of whatever you are baking. As opposed to, let's say, if you are adding liquid food coloring, then that would definitely change the texture of your dough. So I usually prefer to use this kind. I'm covering the part where I added the coloring with a little more dough, just so the color is not on the sides of the bowl. And I'm gonna put this back in the mixer just for a couple of seconds, maybe not even a minute, just to make sure this will have an even color. I'm gonna go as even as I can, and then I'm gonna take it out and finish by hand, just to make sure I'm not overworking the dough. If you were using a liquid food coloring, I would add maybe 10 drops per color. And then from there, you can decide what to do. What I usually do to see if I'm happy with the color is that I just take a piece of the new color and then I compare the contrast with the previous color. So I'm very happy with this one. I do not want this to be too bright. Maybe the pink one, you know, Rosa Mexicano, we want that one to be very bright, but not the yellow. So this looks good to me. I'm going to transfer it to the counter. It's better to get rid of most of it from your paddle attachment because we're going to be using this one for the pink one later. And this one, by the way, this little plastic tool, it's called a bench scraper. This one and my kitchen scale are my favorite baking tools, definitely. If I was traveling before and I knew I would be baking while I was traveling, I would only bring my bench scraper and the kitchen scale, and that would be enough to make a lot of different things. So now that this is nicely colored, I'm gonna finish it by hand just to make sure I have an even yellow. Try not to handle it for too long. As you can see, I'm going kind of quickly. I do not want to melt that butter. And I'm gonna try to create a cylinder, which is gonna be around 8 inches long, give or take. Doesn't have to be exactly that, but give or take 8 inches. Okay, this is good to me. I can still see a lot of indentations. It's not a perfect cylinder, but we'll fix that later when we have our 3 colors. So
How many cookies do we get from this recipe?
Usually around a dozen. It depends on how thick you cut your slices. We're gonna cut slices later for this, but it's, yeah, from 10 to 12 usually, something like that. Okay. This was a little too much. Remember, it's, if you're using a scale, this could be around 280 grams. Okay, that looks good to me. And to this one, I'm gonna add the pink food color. Of course, another thing you can do, if you wanted to use, because right now there are a lot of different options for coloring food available, not just, you know, like the good old food coloring. You can, of course, also use freeze-dried fruit, the one that comes in a powder. And you would also be adding a little bit of colors, of flavor, I mean. So that could be good. That could be a good idea. Okay. I'm going to need
Eliceo, we have a question from Gustavo Gastelum. He's asking, what is your favorite pan dulce?
Oh, that's a very difficult one. I think that could be two. First of all, conchas, of course. Who doesn't love conchas, right? But conchas, it just has a wonderful contrast of textures, and it's also a very, you know, like, it's part of my story since I've taught so many conchas classes by now, and I put so much time and effort in my conchas recipe. But there's another one that I love, and it's called ojo de buey, like bull's eye. I don't know if you're familiar with that one. It's a like a puff pastry ring filled with mantecada batter, which is like cupcake batter. So I guess I'm into textures, right? Because that one also has like a really good contrast of textures. And yeah, but if you haven't had ojo de buey, because it's not as popular as conchas, please do have it. It's easily available, I think, in most Mexican bakeries in the USA. You can find it. Sometimes they call it ojo de pancha as well. I have no idea why.
I found it on Pinterest. Let me see if people can see it.
Oh, there you go.
Ojo de buey. So it's like a bullseye right there.
Uh-huh.
Is it easy to make?
It's not too difficult. Just have to make like a quick puff pastry for the ring, and for the middle, you just have to have a good recipe for like a vanilla cupcake. But yeah, it's not too complicated. I mean, it's not like cuernitos or croissants. That's difficult, but not this one.
I think that's gonna be my next challenge. I'll try to, and I'll try, and I'll send you photos, and you let me know.
Yes, please do. I'm sure you will like it. So we have the pink dough ready to go. I'm gonna do exactly the same thing that I did before. I'm gonna transfer this to the counter. And I'm gonna finish by hand. And again, I'm gonna shape a cylinder that is 8 inches, give or take.
Eliceo, is the other cylinder, is it in a refrigerator or is that room temp?
Oh, no, it's right here at room temperature on the counter. Yeah, that's a good thing about this recipe. You can, because you know, sometimes when you make cookies, you have to take the dough to the fridge for some time and you have to wait. And not this one, you can do everything in just one go. I will rinse my hands very quickly because I don't want to stain my white piece of dough. And make sure you do not mix your dough with your bare hands when you just added your food coloring. Because if you do that, you will have pink hands for the entire week. Okay. So I just have here my white dough. There we go. And I am going to shape this into a cylinder as well. I'm using my bench scraper to get the bits of dough from the counter.
I have a really good question from Helena Gastelum. She's asking, can you use salted butter versus unsalted for this recipe?
I wouldn't do that. Whenever you are baking, I usually recommend using unsalted butter. This is because different brands of butter have different amounts of salt, and you want definitely to control the amount of salt in your baked goods. So I usually use just unsalted butter, and then I can decide how much salt I want in there.
I have another vegan question for you. I know like there's margarine. Is it possible to use the vegetable shortening and margarine? You know, we said about mixing it up with butter since, you know, the margarine is vegan vegetable based.
Yeah, you can definitely do that. Just make sure it's room temperature when you start your recipe and you will be good to go. Okay, so now we have 3 pieces of dough and we have 3 cylinders. As you can see, these are not quite even. They have some indentations, and I'm gonna show you a trick to turn this into perfect cylinders, and this works for all kinds of cookies. All kinds of round shaped cookies, you can use this technique. So what I'm gonna do is that I'm just gonna take a piece of parchment paper or any kind of baking paper that you have in hand. So I'm gonna put this right here and I'm gonna put one of my cylinders inside, just like that. Okay, so now I'm gonna cover the dough with one part of the paper. And then I'm gonna use my bench scraper. You can use any kind of like flat, straight tool like this that you have would work. So I'm gonna go like this, applying pressure towards the dough. I'm doing only the bottom of my dough, just like this. Try to apply an even pressure so you have a nice even piece of dough. And then when you uncover this, voila, you have a very nice even cylinder ready to go.
That's amazing. I didn't know that.
Right?
Yeah, it's great. It's a great trick.
And if you wanted to do just like any kind of round cookie like this, you could just cut your slices from this cylinder and that's it. So I'm gonna do the same with my other 2 pieces of dough. I'm gonna show you from the side this time so you have a better view. So I'm just going like this, applying an even pressure. Do not do this, please, and not go too hard. And that's it. And I'm gonna do that with the white. Make sure to get rid of this little bits of the dough. Okay. And exactly the same thing. And there we go. Okay. And now we have 3 evenly shaped cylinders. So what I'm going to do is that I am going to put 2 of this like this next to each other. Make sure they're very, very close. I'm applying some pressure. I do not want to change the shape of the cylinders, but I want to make sure these 2 are sticking together. Just like that. Okay. And now I'm gonna add the other one on top. Third one goes on top. And there we go. Okay. So once you have that, make sure you have your sheet pan close to you. You can use baking paper, you can use a silicone baking mat, whatever you have in hand. And now, as you can see, these cookies are on the thick side. So I'm gonna cut slices that are around, let's say, half an inch, give or take. And you have your little polvorone ready to go.
That is so cool.
All right. These are so cute, these cookies. I love them. Okay. So what I usually do is that I just cut one and then I get rid of the ruler, and that one would be my guide for the rest of them. You can, of course, use a knife. This last one won't make it. It's too thin and it might burn. So I'm just gonna use the rest of them. Okay.
Eliceo, I have a question from Elena. She says, can you make the dough and put it in the fridge and bake for later?
Yes. So what I would do in that case is that I would actually You can put it in the fridge if it's not going to be for a long time. Let's say if you want to make them in the morning and bake in the afternoon. But another thing that you can do, and you can do this with all kinds of cookies, is that you can freeze them. So
freeze the cookies or freeze the dough?
Freeze the dough. So what I would do is that I would just put my baking tray just like this in the freezer. Then I would wait until these are frozen. And after that, I would put them in a Ziploc bag. So that's what sometimes I do that because, you know, I'm having a lot of classes and I try not to eat all the bread. So sometimes I just freeze them. That's what I would do, let's say, with marranitos. Let me show you the marranitos de piloncillo. So I do that, and then I freeze them, and then I just put them in a Ziploc bag. And then I can just take a couple of these and bake them as I want.
That's brilliant, especially with the holidays coming up, to prepare for ahead of time, or when guests pop up and you can bake something real quick after dinner. Quick question, if folks don't have the silpat, the silicone surface, for the parchment paper, is the parchment paper dry, or do they need to put some kind of PAM, some kind of spray, some little butter, or just as is on the parchment paper?
Oh no, just on the parchment paper, that is quite enough. Mm-hmm. So I got 10 cookies today. So I was saying, depending on how thick yours are, you would get from 10 to a dozen of cookies. And then this would bake. Give me a second, so I'm gonna. So I can see you again. Okay. There we go. Hola de nuevo.
Oh, they look beautiful. How long do they take to bake?
So it depends on your oven. You know, sometimes it's very difficult when I find a recipe and it just says like bake for 15 minutes. It's like, how can you say that? Like if someone has a convection oven, if someone has a gas oven, if someone has like a little countertop oven, these will bake in different speeds. So these ones, it could be maybe from 15 to 20 minutes before they are ready. You want to take them out of the oven when they barely start getting some color, but like very, very lightly. Let me show you the one that has been baked. This one barely has some color. On the bottom, it does have some color, but not on the sides or on the top. That's when you want to take them out of the oven. And if you can, please transfer them to a cooling rack. You will be using any kind of tool to transfer them to a cooling rack. When they are out of the oven, will leave a trace of fat on the tool that you're using to transfer them. And you might think that they are still raw. That is not the case. Please do not put them back in the oven because then they will be too tough. And when you take them out of the oven like this, these will eventually cool down. Then they will be completely dry to the touch. And then they will have a very nice, like a crumbly texture. It's not the same texture as, let's say, like a chocolate chip cookie. Mm-hmm. In that case, you have more like a crunchy kind of texture.
Is it like a shortbread cookie?
Yeah, exactly. This is more like crumbly, exactly, that you bite into it and it just crumbles.
I have a quick question. So we got Jean Denton is saying that her kids say they look like little clouds.
Yeah, they do.
Right? They look like little clouds.
Yeah, like a video game cloud.
And then there's I was asking about what is the spacing between the pieces on the sheet?
Oh, I'm doing right now, let's say like 1 inch at least is good. This will not expand a lot to the sides. But anyway, it's good to leave at least 1 inch among them.
I have Roberta Martinez. She says she had a tia who would make monocolor polvorones. She would use 5 pounds of sugar, 5 pounds of lard, 5 pounds of flour, and she had to make it all by hand. She says this version is much better.
Yeah, it's a little more manageable at home. Yes.
Well, we're almost ready. Let's see. Do you have any of the finished versions there to share? Take a bite and tell us how it all came out.
Of this one?
Yes. Tell us how it came out.
Oh yeah, it was, well, I just have like this one right now. I made this, well, I made the batch earlier for us, so you can see the final product. I think I also made marranitos.
Those look delicious.
Because, you know,
those look really delicious.
Yes, for these ones you would use piloncillo, which is Mexican raw sugar, and you make a syrup out of it. Piloncillos are very cute as well. It's a very nice cookie.
I have a question from folks. Are these cookies traditionally eaten all year long or for a specific holiday?
Usually all year long. Yes. Yes, these are pretty like, you know, like your everyday cookie in Mexico. So here's some marranitos.
That looks amazing. That looks so delicious. They're hard to come by, Luzanne.
Really? You can usually
I guess I got to look out where I'm in mid-city, so it's a little bit hard to find a good panaderia. But those are one of my favorites as well. Eliceo, ya estamos, you know, I want to thank you so much. I'd love to have you back once we open La Cocina via on-site or virtually to continue these conversations of baking, traditions of baking, and it's just so lovely to work with you. Again, muchas gracias. We'll be sending out those recipes out later during the week. Y mientras, I'll pass it over to Abelardo to share some more. Thank you so much, Eliceo. Gusto en verlo, conocerte.
Muchas gracias a ustedes. Thank you so much.
Muchas gracias, Eliceo. Thank you so much, Jimena. Yes, we have, let's see, Jane Denton. Maybe you already said this, but she says, I like cooking with ruler, bench scraper, and scale too. Weighing is easier than measuring cups and spoons. So that's from Jean Denton. Elena Gastulon, more baking demos. This was wonderful. Gracias, La Plaza and Eliceo. So you're welcome. This was our first baking demonstration, wasn't it, Jimena?
Yes, it was.
Yes, and if you came in late to this session, you can rewatch it, or if you want to watch it again, you can rewatch it on our Facebook page and also on our YouTube page. While we were doing this demo, I put all of our En Casa con la Plaza Cocina sessions on a playlist. And believe it or not, this is our 20th En Casa con la Plaza Cocina session. And I'm going to go ahead and put the link on our chat right there. And then I'm also, for you people on Facebook, I'm also placing it right there. And you'll be able to view this one. Then also tirsa with Mexican rice, and yuca when Dora demonstrated as well. So many great cooking demonstrations. Too many, in fact, but enough to last us for you know, to help us out through these pandemic times. So otra vez gracias. If you didn't catch this, YouTube, Facebook, on our website, lapca.com. Coming up this week, tomorrow, Mexican American history makers with a good friend of ours, Armando Duron, a member of the East Side Arts Initiative, an Chicano art collector, and a judge. And then also on Wednesday, that's Tuesday at 7 o'clock. On Wednesday, Carlos Almaraz, Evolution of Form. That's an exhibition that we opened up the week that we closed the museum. We opened this reception. We had an online virtual walkthrough, but tomorrow, on Wednesday, Elsa Flores Almaraz, the great Carlos Almaraz's widow, and she will be giving us an intimate walkthrough where she speaks about certain of the pieces that are on our walls, so that you could become acquainted with this fabulous artist. And then finally on Friday, the Quetzal family trio with Quetzal Flores, Marta Gonzalez, and their son Sandino. It'll be a wonderful concert that's on Friday, September 28th. And also a brand new series that we started just a few weeks ago. It's En Familia con la Plaza. These are family-friendly workshops, read-alongs. We recently did our first cocina, Pico de Gallo, just this last Saturday. You could catch those on our YouTube page. Those are also on a special playlist. And we'll be premiering those weekly on every Saturday at 10:30. So con eso, with that, otra vez, muchas gracias. Thank you to our sponsors, SoCal Gas and the California Humanities and the National Endowment for the Humanities as well. Everybody out there, stay safe. Come back again to En Casa con la Plaza. Otra vez, muchas gracias, Eliceo. Últimas palabras.
No, thank you so much to everyone. Looking forward to see you again.
All right, great. And Jimena.
I'll see you guys next Monday. Thank you so much for joining us. Gracias, Eliseo.
Adiós a todos. Buenas tardes and we'll see you soon.